900 men in shark-infested water. No rescue coming. 4 days of hell. July 30, 1945. The USS Indianapolis had just completed the most secret mission of World War II, delivering the atomic bomb that would end the war. Now the ship was at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and the sailors were floating in the dark, alone. The sharks arrived within hours, hundreds of them, circling, waiting, picking off the weakest first. For 4 days, the U.S. Navy didn't even know the ship was missing. For 4 days, 900 men fought dehydration, hypothermia, and the deadliest predators in the ocean. Only 317 survived. This is the story of the worst naval disaster in American history, and the sharks that made it a nightmare. USS Indianapolis was a Portland-class heavy cruiser. Commissioned in 1932, she'd seen action across the Pacific, surviving kamikaze attacks and earning 10 battle stars. By July 1945, she was a veteran warship with a veteran crew, but nothing prepared them for what came next. On July 16, 1945, Captain Charles McVay III received classified orders in California. He was handed a metal canister, 15 feet long and heavily guarded. Nobody told him what was inside. It was uranium-235, the core of Little Boy, the atomic bomb destined for Hiroshima. The mission was simple: deliver the canister to Tinian Island in the Mariana Islands. Fast. The fate of the war depended on it. Indianapolis set sail immediately. No escort, no destroyer screen, just speed. She crossed 5,000 miles of ocean in 10 days, a record. On July 26, she arrived at Tinian and delivered the canister. Mission accomplished. The crew had no idea they just delivered the weapon that would kill 140,000 people and end World War II. They were ordered to proceed to Leyte Gulf in the Philippines for training exercises. Captain McVay requested an escort. He was denied. The Navy told him the route was safe. Submarine activity was minimal. They were wrong. On July 30, 1945, at 00:15 hours 15 minutes after midnight, Indianapolis was steaming through the Philippine Sea. Most of the crew was asleep. The night was calm. No moon. Visibility was poor. That's when the torpedoes hit. The Japanese submarine I-58, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Makitsura Hashimoto, had been stalking the Indianapolis for hours. Hashimoto couldn't believe his luck. A massive American cruiser, sailing alone, no zigzag pattern, no escorts. At 00:14 hours, he fired 6 Type 95 torpedoes. 2 hit. The first torpedo struck the bow, obliterating the forward section. The explosion vaporized dozens of sailors instantly. The second hit midship, destroying the engine room and cutting power to the entire ship. The USS Indianapolis was 610 feet long and weighed 10,000 tons. She began sinking immediately. Chaos erupted. No power meant no lights, no communications, and no way to send an SOS. The PA system was dead. Sailors in the lower decks had no idea what was happening. They just felt the ship tilting, heard the screaming, and felt the water rushing in. Captain McVay gave the order to abandon ship, but most of the crew never heard it. In the darkness, men scrambled for life jackets. Some grabbed them, some didn't. The ship was listing so badly that sailors were sliding across the deck, crashing into bulkheads, and tumbling into the ocean. 12 minutes after the torpedoes hit, the USS Indianapolis rolled over and sank. Of the 1,196 men aboard, approximately 300 went down with the ship. The remaining 900 were now floating in the Pacific Ocean, in the dark, miles from land, with no distress signal sent. Nobody knew they were there, and the sharks were already circling. When the sun rose on July 30, the survivors took stock of their situation. It was worse than anyone imagined. They were scattered across miles of ocean. Some men had life jackets, most didn't. A few rafts had broken free from the ship, but they were overcrowded. 30 men clinging to rafts designed for 12. The water was warm, 85 degrees Fahrenheit, which sounds good until you realize it means slower hypothermia but faster dehydration. The sun was merciless. Men's lips cracked, skin blistered, salt water splashed into mouths, making thirst unbearable. By mid-morning, some men started drinking seawater. Their officers screamed at them to stop. Seawater causes hallucinations, kidney failure, and madness. But thirst is a primal urge. Men who drank seawater would be dead within 24 hours. Then the sharks arrived. Oceanic white-tip sharks, the most aggressive species in open water. They're attracted to splashing, blood, and the electrical signals of distress. The survivors were a buffet. At first, the sharks were cautious. They circled, bumped into legs, tested the waters. Then they attacked. Sailors described it as a nightmare. A man would be floating one moment, then suddenly yanked underwater. Gone. A scream, thrashing, then silence. Blood spreading across the surface. The sharks learned quickly. The men without life jackets were easy prey. They couldn't stay afloat. They got tired. They sank. The sharks took them. them. Dr. Lewis Haynes, the ship's senior medical officer, was in the water with hundreds of men. He later said, "The sharks were around, hundreds of them. You'd hear guys scream, especially late at night. They'd scream and then you'd hear nothing." By the end of the first day, dozens of men were dead. Some from injuries, some from drowning, some from sharks. And the U.S. Navy still didn't know the Indianapolis was missing. Day 2 was worse. The sun rose again. No rescue. Men were delirious from dehydration. Hallucinations began. Sailors saw islands that weren't there. Some saw the Indianapolis, fully intact, floating just below the surface. They dove down to reach it. They drowned. Others hallucinated freshwater. They swore they could see fountains, rivers, and waterfalls. They drank seawater in massive gulps. Within hours, they were screaming nonsense, attacking their friends, and swimming away into the open ocean. The sharks took them. The men in the rafts tried to maintain order. They rationed water, tiny sips from emergency supplies. They tied ropes around groups of swimmers to keep them together. They sang songs to keep morale up. But every hour, someone else disappeared. The sharks became bolder. They stopped circling and started hunting. Survivor Woody James described it. They would come up and bump you. They were testing you. If you didn't fight back, they'd take you. Some men fought. They punched sharks in the nose. They kicked. They screamed. Some sharks backed off. Others didn't. By day 3, the groups of survivors were shrinking. Men who'd been strong swimmers on day 1 were now too weak to move. They floated motionless, waiting for death. Captain McVay, floating with one group, kept telling his men, "They'll find us. They know where we are. Just hold on." But they didn't know. The Indianapolis had never sent an SOS. And due to a bureaucratic failure, the Navy didn't track the ship's arrival at Leyte Gulf. When Indianapolis didn't show up, nobody noticed. By day 4, August 2, 1945, more than half the survivors were dead. The living were skeletal, sunburned, covered in saltwater ulcers, delirious. Some had given up. They just floated face down and died. Then, at 10:25 hours, a miracle happened. Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn was piloting a PV-1 Ventura bomber on a routine patrol. He wasn't looking for survivors. He was hunting submarines. But his radio antenna was malfunctioning, so he dropped altitude to fix it. That's when he saw them. At first, he thought it was an oil slick. Then he saw movement. Bodies. Hundreds of them. Some waving. Some motionless. Gwynn radioed immediately. Many men in the water. The Navy didn't believe him at first. There were no ships reported missing. But Gwynn insisted. He dropped life rafts and emergency supplies. He marked the location. Within hours, rescue ships arrived. The USS Cecil J. Doyle. The USS Bassett. Seaplanes landed on the water, pulling men from the ocean. But the rescue was chaotic. Many men were too weak to grab the rescue lines. Some had to be cut free from groups tied together with ropes. Some were tangled in life jackets, floating face down, already dead. The rescuers were horrified. They'd never seen anything like it. Hundreds of burned, dehydrated, and hallucinating sailors. Shark bite wounds. Men screaming about Japanese submarines that weren't there. The final count of the 1,196 men aboard USS Indianapolis, only 317 survived. 879 dead. The worst single loss of life in U.S. naval history. And most of those deaths happened after the ship sank in the water. Over 4 days. With the sharks, the Navy didn't want the story to get out. It was embarrassing. A major warship sunk. Nearly 900 men dead. No distress signal. No rescue for 4 days. A bureaucratic nightmare. So they needed a scapegoat. Captain Charles McVay III was court-martialed in November 1945. The charge, hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag. The Navy argued that if McVay had been zigzagging, the torpedoes would have missed. It was absurd. McVay had been following orders. The Navy had told him the route was safe. They'd denied him an escort. And even the Japanese submarine commander, Hashimoto, testified that zigzagging wouldn't have mattered. He would have sunk the ship anyway. But the Navy needed someone to blame. McVay was convicted. He was the only U.S. Navy captain court-martialed for losing a ship to enemy action during World War II. The survivors were furious. They knew McVay wasn't responsible. They wrote letters, testified, and protested. It didn't matter. For the rest of his life, McVay received hate mail from families of the dead. On November 6, 1968, at age 70, he committed suicide. He shot himself on his front lawn. It wasn't until the year 2000, 55 years after the sinking, that the U.S. Congress passed a resolution exonerating Captain McVay. The Navy finally admitted McVay was not at fault. But by then, most of the survivors were dead. And McVay had been in his grave for 32 years. July 30, 1945. 900 men in the water. 4 days of sharks, dehydration, and death. Only 317 survived. The USS Indianapolis delivered the atomic bomb that ended the war. Then the ocean took its revenge. The sharks
remember. The survivors never forgot.